Jessica Morrison had joined the Galactic Exchange Program mostly for practical reasons. A full year of off-world teaching would strengthen her academic profile and earn valuable credits toward her doctorate. Teaching elementary mathematics to alien children on Kepler Station 7 sounded challenging but manageable. What she never imagined was that this decision would turn her into a legend across multiple star systems. Life on Kepler 7 had a strange rhythm. Ordinary days didn't really exist when your classroom was filled with children who had glowing skin, extra limbs, or bodies that didn't fully occupy normal space. Jessica had learned to adapt quickly. One moment she was explaining angles and shapes, and the next she was answering curious biological questions. "Miss Jessica," chirped Zilith, a young Proean, her tentacles swaying with excitement. "Why do humans only have 2 arms? Isn't that inefficient?" Jessica smiled and adjusted the floating holo display behind her. "We manage just fine," she replied lightly. "Sometimes fewer tools just mean you learn how to use them better." The room filled with giggles, some audible, some expressed through flashes of color or soft harmonic vibrations. There were 23 students in her class, representing 7 entirely different species. Teaching them had been difficult at first. The twin Lyrans communicated through shifting hues. Breen, a methane breather, attended lessons inside a sealed environmental pod. The Kelvin children were crystalline and heavy, their movements precise and careful. Yet beneath all those differences they were still children, curious, energetic, easily distracted, and eager to learn. Then without warning the station screamed. The alarm wasn't loud in the usual sense. It was deeper, a vibration that rattled bones and made Jessica's teeth ache. Emergency lights flooded the room in harsh red. Her data pad lit up with cascading warnings: atmospheric failure, hull breach, Sector 7G compromised. Sector 7G was their sector. "Everyone stay calm," Jessica said, forcing steadiness into her voice while her heart pounded. Every set of eyes, dozens of them in wildly different shapes, locked onto her face. The trust in their expressions terrified her more than the alarms. She was only 26, a graduate student from Earth. Someone who still struggled with basic adult responsibilities. She wasn't trained for emergencies like this. But in that moment she was the only one they had. The station's AI began issuing evacuation instructions, but Jessica quickly realized the problem. The nearest safe shelter was beyond sealed blast doors and through a damaged junction. The escape pods were built for adult bodies, not children, and certainly not children with vastly different physical needs. She scanned the room desperately for options. Then her gaze landed on the supply closet. It was reinforced, part of the station's core structure. Not meant as a shelter, but strong enough to survive pressure shifts. It wasn't ideal. It was the only choice. "All right, class," Jessica announced, injecting forced cheer into her voice. "We're going to play a new game. It's called survival training." The familiar tone worked. The children responded instinctively, moving toward her and the supply closet without panic. Everyone inside. Quickly. As they crowded toward the small room, Jessica's thoughts raced. Oxygen usage. Atmospheric compatibility. Spatial limits. The closet was designed to store tools and art materials, not living beings. She yanked emergency air canisters from the wall, her hands trembling as the station shuddered again. The smaller students went in first. The twins folded easily into the corners. Zilith's tentacles compressed far more than Jessica expected. Breen's methane chamber, however, was bulky and rigid. The Kelvin children were dense and crystalline, their bodies allowing very little flexibility. "It's too small, Miss Jessica," whispered Cora, a Kelvin child whose voice rang softly like chimes. "We won't all fit." Through the reinforced classroom windows, Jessica saw chaos. A massive cargo vessel had struck the station's outer ring. Atmosphere streamed into the void like a bleeding wound. Twisted debris spun slowly in the distance. They had minutes, maybe less. "Yes, we will," Jessica said firmly. She began arranging them carefully, like a living three-dimensional puzzle. Flexible bodies wrapped around rigid forms. Smaller children were lifted and stacked where possible. She adjusted breathing zones, ensuring every species had access to the correct environment. Every dull lecture from her xenobiology courses suddenly mattered. 22 children fit. Barely. There were 23. Breen's chamber consumed too much space. There was no configuration that allowed both him and Jessica to remain inside while maintaining a proper seal. Breen looked at her through the clear casing, 3 eye stalks calm and understanding. "No," Jessica said immediately. "Absolutely not." She looked at the packed closet, then at the emergency supplies in her hands. The math was cruelly simple. Her space was the difference. She stepped out, Breen could fit. The door could seal. The children would survive. The station groaned violently. Metal shrieked somewhere nearby. Jessica made her decision. She guided Breen's chamber into the final opening, adjusting the arrangement one last time. "You're all going to be fine," she said, memorizing their faces. "Rescue is coming. Stay calm. Help each other. Remember what we learned about working together." "Miss Jessica?" Zilith asked softly. "What about you?" "I'll be right outside," Jessica replied with a smile that wasn't entirely honest. She sealed the door. The lock hissed as pressure stabilized. Through the small window, 23 pairs of alien eyes stared back at her. Jessica raised her thumb in a human gesture she had taught them meant everything is okay. Then she turned to face the failing station alone. The next several minutes blurred together. Jessica worked on instinct and fragments of half-remembered training. She tore off her jacket and used emergency tape to seal a spreading crack in the corridor wall. Air screamed past her as she pressed her body against the breach, forcing the seal to hold. She rerouted power from the classroom systems into the supply closet's environmental controls, overriding safety locks she barely understood. Her fingers flew across the interface as warning messages flashed in every known language. She ignored them all. When the nearby blast doors began to fail, she rushed to the manual controls. The backup crank resisted her efforts, grinding against bent metal. She kept turning anyway. Pain flared as the handle tore into her palms, but she didn't stop. Blood slicked the grip. The door held just barely. The station shook again, harder this time. Jessica stumbled but stayed on her feet. She was reinforcing a failing bulkhead seal when bright figures emerged through the smoke and flashing lights. Rescue personnel in pressure suits burst into the corridor, moving with trained precision. "Civilian located," one of them shouted. Relief hit her like a wave. Jessica's legs finally gave out. She collapsed into their arms as the adrenaline drained from her body. She woke 3 days later in the station's medical wing. The first thing she noticed was the quiet. The second was the crowd. Screens lined the walls, replaying footage from inside the supply closet. The children had recorded everything using internal cameras. From their perspective, billions across the galaxy had watched a human teacher choose to stay behind so her students could live. The video spread faster than anyone expected. Across countless worlds, viewers saw her quick thinking, her understanding of alien physiology, and her refusal to abandon even one child. The story went viral across the galactic network. "You're a hero," said Captain Rodriguez, standing beside her bed. "The Council wants to award you the Star of Valor." "I was just doing my job," Jessica replied weakly. "No," came a soft chiming voice. Cora stood in the doorway, all 22 classmates crowded behind her. Beyond them were hundreds of alien parents, representatives from species Jessica had only seen in textbooks. "You were being human," Cora said. "And that mattered." The Galactic Council moved quickly. Within weeks, Jessica Morrison was formally recognized as the first human to receive the Protector's Honor, an award that hadn't been granted in over 300 years. Diplomatic channels buzzed with praise. News programs dissected her actions frame by frame. Academics debated human adaptability and empathy as evolutionary advantages. Jessica tried to avoid most of it. To her, the medals and titles felt distant, almost unreal. What mattered far more was what happened after she was cleared to return to work. Every morning, 23 students walked safely into her classroom. The station had repaired Sector 7G, reinforcing it beyond previous standards. The supply closet still existed, now officially designated as an emergency shelter, named after her, much to her embarrassment. Class resumed with a familiar rhythm. Geometry lessons. Basic equations. Endless questions about Earth customs. The children still laughed the same way. They still argued. They still tested her patience. And yes, they still asked about human anatomy. "Miss Jessica," Zilith asked one day, tentacles waving thoughtfully, "why do humans really only have 2 arms?" Jessica smiled, looking around the room at faces she knew she would never forget. "Because sometimes," she said gently, "it's not about how many arms you have. It's about what you choose to do with them." The class grew quiet, understanding settling in across species and cultures. Jessica had joined the Galactic Exchange Program to advance her career. She stayed because she had found something far more important, a reminder that courage, compassion, and responsibility weren't limited by biology. And across 3 star systems, the word human came to mean something new.